Thank you very much, Madam President. This is a picture of Weick Brothers Farm in Sharon, Connecticut. Sharon is located in the very northwest portion of the great state of Connecticut. And it has been an active farm held by the same family, the Weick Brothers, for 150 years. It's about 144 acres. It's a pasture now for free-range chickens, pigs, and cattle. The farm's roadside store, which is used by people from Connecticut and Massachusetts and New York, given that it sits right at the crux of those three states. It sells beef and pork, sausages, eggs, apple smoked bacon, maple syrup, to name a few. We are able to know confidently that this piece of iconic farmland that is producing for the neighboring towns and states is going to be able to continue as a farm because of something that Congress did. Congress passed, enacted in 2006, a land conservation incentive in our tax code that gives a small tax incentive to farmers who decide to put a conservation easement on their land to make sure that it doesn't fall into the hands of developers. Further, we provide a slightly smaller discount, a slightly smaller tax incentive to private non-farm, non-agricultural landowners who want to either donate their land, who want to also put a conservation easement on their land to make sure that it doesn't get developed. This has been of enormous benefit in the state of Connecticut. We have preserved 11,000 acres of land in Connecticut just since this tax incentive went on the books. That's a 45% increase over the previous period of time before we put that tax incentive on the books. And it's a wonderful bipartisan policy because we are able, by discounting people's taxes, to be able to keep land as open space, without it, frankly, going into the hands of public landowners, which is often met with resistance from a lot of members from our western states. Land stays in the hands of the private landowner, or in this case, in the hands of the Weick brothers, who have been farming it for a century and a half. But we know that because of that conservation easement, it will be maintained as open space. And as bipartisan as that idea is, the entire genesis of land conservation is a bipartisan idea. Maybe even to the extent it's partisan, a Republican idea. It was Teddy Roosevelt who quadrupled the acreage in our national forests, who invented the National Wildlife Refuge System, proclaimed 18 national monuments. He said in 1910 that conservation is a great moral issue, for it involves the patriotic duty of ensuring the safety and continuance of the nation. It was Richard Nixon that created the EPA, that signed into law the Clean Water Act. He said this in 1970, clean air, clean water, open spaces. These should once again be the birthright of every American. And while there aren't a lot of Democrats coming down to the floor and quoting Ronald Reagan, he had some pretty impressive things to say about this country's commitment and his movement's commitment to conservation as well. This is what Ronald Reagan said. He said, "What is a conservative, after all, but one who conserves, one who's committed to protecting and holding close the things by which we live." And we want to protect and conserve the land on which we live, our countryside, our rivers and our mountains, our plains, our meadows and forests. This is our patrimony. This is what we leave to our children. Ronald Reagan said, "Our great moral responsibility is to leave it to them either as we found it or better than we found it." And so, Madam President, I'm here today to speak in favor of the continuance of the Land Conservation Tax Incentive Program that we hope will be in whatever tax extension deal gets passed by the Congress. As many proponents of provisions in that extension package would like, it would be much better if this was permanent. It's very difficult to do long-term planning for owners and operators of big farms like Weick Brothers if they don't know that the tax incentive is going to be there for them. It's very difficult to do this retroactively, but important nonetheless to get this extended. Because this isn't the only piece of property in our state that's been protected. Towner Hill Farm in Sherman, Connecticut, is an 80-acre property that would not have been protected if it weren't for the federal tax deduction, which was available to the owner in 2008. He offered it to the town of Sherman at less than the value that he might have gotten in a private land sale because he knew he was going to be able to get this tax incentive. And now it's home to one of the most popular hiking areas in all of that area in Sherman, Connecticut. Vanishing Geese Farm in Durham, Connecticut, the center of the state, has a 42-acre farm that's been in the Scott family since the 1970s, and they desperately want to continue farming, but the ability to have a conservation easement purchased from them put money in their pockets that allowed them to continue to farm, but also gave them peace of mind, knowing that this piece of land that they love is going to be able to stay as open space. Mr. Scott said this in his own colloquial way. He said, "Having worked the land, cut my firewood from it, raised sheep on it, and hate it, I have developed a lot of affection for it." In regard to the donation of the easement, he said, "I told my kids that my chest was puffed out a little more when I walked out there in the snow. It was nice to know that this land will never be developed. I feel like I've kind of kept faith with the land and with the critters on it." This is a really important tax incentive that, as I said, has resulted in tens of thousands of acres being preserved in the state of Connecticut. It's maybe the most important legacy that we leave, to recognize that part of the true greatness of this country is the land upon which we live, the open spaces that define what it is to be an American. I mean, the Industrial Revolution powered us to global greatness, but we, maybe better than any other nation in the world, have found this miraculous way to marry together development and conservation, to decide that there are going to be places that we are going to develop for their natural resources or for their industrial capacity, but then there are going to be these magical places like this beautiful farm in northwestern Connecticut where agriculture is happening and which to many of us defines the character of the place in which we live. Practical reasons why you should conserve a place like White Brothers Farm to continue agriculture, but I would almost argue spiritual reasons as well, reasons having to do with what it is to be a citizen and inhabitant of this great nation. Republicans and Democrats, over the course of our congressional history, have come together to protect open spaces. And since 2006, Republicans and Democrats have come together to protect this important tax incentive. 221 House members have co-sponsored the legislation. It's 27 senators. And I'll leave with this. It's a bipartisan legacy for me as well. I ran a spirited race for the United States Congress in 2006, beating a 24-year incumbent, Republican Nancy Johnson. And there are places where I departed from her legacy, and there were places that I inherited it. Nancy Johnson was one of the authors, one of the creators of this important conservation tax incentive. And so in my corner of the world, there's a legacy of standing up for it, which is why I come down to the floor today. I thank the body for their time.